Many modern Christians would recoil in embarrassment from a straightforward reading of what the Star of Bethlehem was actually supposed to have done. Too harsh? Let's find out.
This is a zodiac mosaic in a Jewish synagogue. There are a lot of these, a couple dozen of them, that archaeologists have found. And you would look at this and say, well, these Jews must have been pagans then. No, they had a different perception of what was going on in the sky and who's in charge and what it means, as opposed to the pagans. Pagan astrology, astronomy, there really wasn't much of a difference in the ancient world, is more like what we think of today with horoscopes, that individual birth signs, when I was born, what day, what's going on in this, that determines my fate, it determines my personality, it determines the outcomes of my life. No, it doesn't do any of those things. A Jew would say that's heresy.
The ancient Hebrew people would have looked at the stars and said there's more going on in the sky, in the heavenly realm, in the heavens, than modern people would. Would they have taken it so far as to go into sort of these more pagan ideas that, like, maybe the stars determine your fate, determine who you are? No, God, the Creator, determines those things. But has God communicated something about himself, his purpose, the future in those stars? I think that it seems like they would have been open to that possibility far more than modern Christian believers would be, and I think that we should maybe take a lesson from that.
Only God is sovereign. What you can tell, though, is that God is working a plan, because God's plans are linked to time. So we need to be paying attention to what the skies are doing, because they might tell us something about what God is about to do. Now, the people who are really into this would be the people at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. They have a number of astronomical texts there. They track this let's put it this way. They separated from the Pharisees. They thought the Pharisees were liberals because the Pharisees used a calendar they didn't like. It's what, we hear that and we think it's crazy, but they were that serious about it.
Yeah, and I wonder, we've lost something, I think, in this. Do we go all the way back into kind of an ancient idea of the stars and the sky and the heavens? I don't know. I think that we incorporate our modern understanding of what the stars and the sky are, but I think that we have lost something by abandoning the idea of heaven or the heavens for the idea of space. This is a zooming in of something that we touched on in the C.S. Lewis and simulation theory video. I just didn't have time to unpack this particular part of that, but I think that is something that I would hope that we would recapture as, modern people, not in the sense of modernity, but current. I think our current state of the world would do well if we could recapture the idea of heavens or the heavenly realm, and not abandon it to the degree that we have because of modern rationalism. That would be my hope. So I think you look back at these Qumran people and you're just like, man, there's something to be kind of admired there.
But I want to move from this idea that there was a Jewish conception of the skies were important, what's going on here, because they telegraph certain things, to Revelation 12. Now, I can't prove this, but I suspect that what Paul was thinking, we actually have recorded in Revelation 12. But okay. John, in Revelation...
What is Paul thinking? Paul says a few things, but he does say this: for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. So this is general revelation. This is the idea that God has revealed himself in nature. But to what degree has God revealed himself? How far do we take this idea of general revelation?
Revelation says this. Several times he says, I looked up in the sky and saw. What if John actually meant what he said? What if he's keying parts of Revelation to astronomical signage?
And this is what it comes down to. Just a straightforward reading of what the Bible actually says. What if we read Revelation and just assume that the author of Revelation, John, meant what he wrote? I don't feel like that's a crazy take.
What if he's doing that? A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth.
Right. So this is a birth narrative. I think people overlook this because it's in Revelation, but this is a birth narrative. So it has to do with the Star of Bethlehem and Jesus's birth, the story that we have in Matthew and elsewhere.
And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Okay, verse 5 is crystal clear. It's quoting a messianic psalm. Okay, it's quoted elsewhere about Jesus. This is a reference to the birth of the Messiah. The notion of being caught up to God and his throne is a notion of the resurrection and ascension. But before that...
And is that okay that John can do that? He can sort of give us two perspectives. There is, the birth and then, resurrection and ascension here. That's okay. And I think sometimes people get confused because they can't quite see how much distance is in between what his narrative is saying. Maybe that's helpful. I don't know.
You get all this astronomical imagery. Now, I'm not the first one to suggest this, but I suspect very strongly that this is what Paul was thinking about when he said, hey, have people heard about, the Savior? Heard, what's going on here? And, again, you'd expect him to say no. And he says, well, they actually have.
Ooh, what do we do with this one? Romans 10:17. So faith comes from hearing, and hearing the word of Christ. But I say, surely they have never heard, have they? Indeed they have. They've heard. What have they heard? Have they heard the word of Christ? See, that would be special revelation. We would think God revealed himself in his Son, Jesus Christ, specifically. Their voice has gone out into all the earth, and their words into all the world. Their voice. Their line has gone through all the earth, and their utterance to the end of the world. This is Psalm 19. And in them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is a bridegroom. Okay, so he's talking about the stars. Paul, quoting Psalm 19, is talking about the stars. No other translations have it as the sound has gone through all the earth, the sound of the stars, which is really interesting because stars do make a sound. If you ever want to look at, listen to something interesting, look at the celestial white noise. It's a recording of outer space or the heavens for the sake of our discussion here. So when Paul says, have they not heard? Indeed they have. And he quotes Psalm 19. He's saying that, I don't know, am I taking this too far? That faith comes through hearing the word of Christ. The word of Christ has been heard by them because the voice of the stars has gone out through all the earth. It seems like we're mixing general revelation and special revelation. This is a challenge for me to interpret this, but I think where I'm at with this is that stars are more than we assume them to be. There's just more going on in what we would call outer space, what the ancient people would have thought as the heavenly realm. There is communication, and we kind of modern people would say, yeah, the stars are kind of beautiful and they show us how beautiful things are, and God has revealed himself generally in creation. And it seems like ancient people would have taken that a step further and said, actually, he's communicating something a little bit more specific. And it seems like that's where Paul is leaning in this passage, the word of Christ in verse 17. And then he quotes Psalm 19 in verse 18 of Romans 10. And they are kind of linked. What do you do with them? That was what I would like to know. That's why this channel exists, for discussion, not just to hear me ramble, but it's like I get to engage with Michael Heiser's ideas here. I get to share my own ideas, and then you all get to communicate to me. You can leave comments. I mean, you can hit me up on Twitter, and we can carry on that discussion. We can use the internet for some good, hopefully.
And then he quotes Psalm 19. See, Revelation 12 doesn't exist yet. Okay, Revelation is the last book of the New Testament, but he quotes Psalm 19. It says, yeah, they've heard. The heavens declare the glory of God, so on and so forth. All these verbs of communication. Paul is associating the knowledge of the Messiah King, his arrival, with something going on in the skies.
Yeah.
That much we can say. And Revelation 12 gives us a pretty easy thing to track in an astronomy program. Now, I'm going to go through some of this. Yeah. But before I do it, let me say what I'm not saying.
This is where some of the sensitivities of modern evangelical normie Christians might get a little we're pushing, and that's good. It's good to stretch your thinking on some of this. I do think that a lot of people, I don't really want to unpack this exactly, but a lot of people who have maybe rejected Christianity are not rejecting biblical Christianity. I think what they're rejecting is a modern, safe, watered down, lukewarm version of biblical Christianity that we have in modern times, that we interact with. And I don't want to be too harsh to like the modern evangelical church, but that's, I think, where some of that comes from. I think we can all agree that sometimes the church just takes a really safe approach, and that's not interesting. And honestly, it doesn't answer the questions that I have. It doesn't supply me with the needs that I have to get through life. So here we are. We're jumping into an astronomy program. Let's go.
Are those in evangelical circles, their belief was that you could look at the constellations of the skies and they told you the entire plan of salvation. Like they went through the Romans road to the heavens. I don't believe that.
Right, so that's too far.
Okay, that overclaims the data. What I do believe is that, like the Magi, there's something going on at a certain time in history that told them there's going to be a divine king born in Bethlehem. Saddle up the camels. We have to go see.
All right, we're going to unpack the Magi here after he goes through the stars. So you got to stick to that one, because I think the Magi are fascinating people, somewhat mysterious, and yet because they're talked about every Christmas, we just kind of go, oh yeah, Magi, wise men. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were more than that.
Jews would have noticed it. Gentiles, like the Magi, would have noticed it because they were watching. And they believed that the Creator God, the God of Israel, was capable of telegraphing stuff like this. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar that the Qumran people used is the only calendar in the ancient world that creates a time window for the Messiah's arrival that matches Jesus. Okay? I don't think that's a coincidence. So having said that, let's get into what I think we can claim. On your screen, you see a few things. There's the sun and the moon, and then there's a line. The line is called the ecliptic. This is a line that astronomers will draw to track the movement of the constellations. You notice the sun and the moon there. The sun is in the midst of the woman, the virgin, Virgo. Okay, and Virgo, again, there's different ways to understand the 12 stars around her head, depending on which astronomer you would read. That you can get 12 stars in this or that method. But again, she's the woman with the 12 stars, the virgin who is about to give birth. The sun is in her midst. It's Revelation 12. And the moon is at her feet. You'll notice above her head, I've let my astronomy program show Regulus and Jupiter. Now, they are not mentioned in Revelation 12, but if you put the information in Revelation 12 into an astronomy program, this is produced. What's the big deal about Regulus and Jupiter? Jupiter was the king planet because it's the biggest one. Regulus was viewed as the king star because of its brightness. Okay, here, they are overlapped. They are superimposed on each other. If you are one of these old ancient astronomy guys, that's going to draw your attention because both are associated with kingship. Constellation Virgo is the only constellation that represents a woman.
Well, that's a bummer. Like, Only one woman in the sky? What's up, guys? Come on, let's go. What about representation? Okay, sorry, I got distracted by that. Hey, so again, remember, this is partially a birth narrative in Revelation 12. The joining of Jupiter and Regulus is what some people would believe, and I think there's some evidence to that, that this is the star that the Magi followed. This is the Bethlehem star. When that star and that planet combined, they made a very bright star in the sky that helped the wise men find where the Messiah was born. So again, the Regulus and Jupiter thing is missed if we just focus on Revelation 12 and forget the birth narrative portion of that.
For 20 days, Virgo was clothed with the sun, but the exact day when the moon was under her feet at the same time, and by the way, when Regulus and Jupiter intersect, and this is the view over Jerusalem, by the way, that could only occur during an 80-minute period within those 20 days. Okay, astronomy is linked to time, so we can calculate. You'll notice I've put the stick figures in now for the constellations so you can see this a little better. We've got in the center there, that's Virgo. She doesn't look as attractive as a stick figure. Sun, moon at her feet. Jupiter and Regulus co-joined. And what is the constellation above Virgo?
This is very good. It's good.
It's the lion. It's Leo. What does that mean to a Jew? The lion is the sign of what? The tribe of Judah. Okay? Judah, Regulus and Jupiter are intersecting in Leo. Okay. What was that king? What tribe was he supposed to be from?
Yeah, and like, again, we feel like we're stretching this, but isn't it just possible that since Scripture tells us that God has revealed himself in nature, that he has revealed himself in the stars, that the stars are communicating something. They're speaking. They're going forth with a message. And here you are, the king star, the king planet, intersecting in Leo, the constellation. And I know that sounds like woo-woo stuff to a lot of people, but it's like, it's there. It's right there if you're willing to look at it and not get sort of the feathers ruffled and just realize that, I think ancient people had a lot more figured out than we think. In fact, we're missing some of this stuff. Some of this stuff would have been obvious to ancient people, and we look at it and go, "Oh, I'm not sure that there's anything there. There's something there."
Oh yeah, Judah. And you notice below her feet, in modern astronomy programs, we have two constellations. One is Libra, the other is Scorpio. In the ancient world, they were one constellation, and it was like a scorpion with pincers. And scorpions were at times referred to as a dragon, but you have another option for the dragon. That is Hydra, also located below Virgo, but off the ecliptic. Doesn't really matter. You got two choices.
Okay, you tell me which one, Crab Pincher Man or Hydra. I'm kind of leaning towards Hydra. I don't know. There's lots of biblical references to like the ocean, the deep, chaos. The Messiah coming to bring peace out of that chaos, to conquer the dragon. You let me know. I don't want to influence the poll here. Okay, so which one is it?
Okay, he's ready to devour the child when the child is born. There's a small window of time when all of these things are present. September 11, 3 BC date also corresponded, what a coincidence, to Rosh Hashanah, Tishri 1, New Year's Day for Jews, and the Day of Trumpets. Tishri 1 was also the New Year's Day of the civil calendar, according to the calendar accepted in Judah during the divided monarchy. In other words, it marked the first day of the reign of every new Davidic king.
Yeah. Okay. There's actually 2 videos of this lecture on the interwebs, and this is what Michael Heiser put out on his channel prior to his death. But there's another one, and it's interesting to see which includes this, because so that date, that specific date, is important for a lot of reasons. Okay, it's the new year, coronation day for the king. You've got Jupiter, Regulus intersecting in Leo. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. But they skip over this because maybe they're a little concerned.
There's a small window of time when all of these things are present. And that time is 3 BC, and this is the part that freaks some people out. September 11th. September 11th, 3 BC is the window of time in which all of these things are present. Now, people would say, oh, well, I'll wait to get to an objection here.
Okay.
Let's just throw this.
Okay, so there we are. So, yeah, and Heiser also did a podcast on this where he goes into this a little bit more. And he says, as a supernaturalist, I think there is something to that date. Now, I'm an American, I'm coming at you from America, so that date does mean a lot to me. It's significant. And, one does wonder, is that a shot across the bow, so to speak? Is that a signal, so to speak? Is that just somebody, is it a coincidence? I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it could be coincidental, and yet here's the thing. This is what, again, we struggle to see this in our kind of modern reductionist, naturalist approach to things, is that even if that was a coincidence as far as the people planning it, was it a coincidence as far as the heavenly realm and the things that are orchestrated within the heavens? Because a lot of ancient people, and I think we should recapture this a little bit, would have said what is going on in the heavenly realm really does influence or even dictate what's going on in the natural realm. They're not disconnected or disjointed. They, at the very least, influence one another. Or maybe even it's the heavenly that's more powerful and is influencing what's going on in the earthly realm or the natural realm. And Heiser, in his podcast on this, and I'll link it in the description, goes into that a little bit more. He's just like, as a supernaturalist, I am not going to discount the fact that this date does kind of send off some lights and sirens and things like that. No pun intended. Sorry for that, but yeah, interesting that would be what is the significance. That I would also love to hear. What I want to do right now is actually go back to the Magi, because I think that this is something that is also lost on us. So, okay. Tell me again what you think about this. And we'll land the plane here, I think, with this question of who are the Magi. I'm willing to think about this in a broader sense. So give me your feedback, any resources that you might have on this where we can further this discussion. Matthew chapter 2, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Now again, what Heiser's point is that the stars are a way for us to keep time. And so here we are in the days of Herod. We're linked to time here again. Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born, the King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we have come to worship him." Ironically, the first people who come to worship the Messiah are not Jews. They're not even nearby. They come from the east, and they knew to come to worship him because of the star that they saw in the east. So that would be the Bethlehem star, the joining of Regulus and Jupiter. But who are these people? They're Magi. And we say, okay, they're wise men. Got it. And then we kind of leave it there. But I think there's more to it.
First.
I'm sorry. And I don't want to be anachronistic here. Okay, so there is a danger here that you can go back and read your modern, the modern understanding of this word back into the text, where the ancient writers would not have thought of this. The famous one is the word dunamis. We would say, well, this is power, right? This idea of power, because we have this word of dynamite. And so we would then think the power, the dunamis that the author is talking about is this dynamic dynamite power. Well, no, the dynamite hadn't been invented yet, so they would not have thought about dynamite. So I don't want to read back into the text a modern understanding of this word for magi, and I'm going to try not to do that. The root word here is associated with magic. It's associated with magicians. Now again, we're trying not to think of, magicians the way we think of it. What would an ancient person have thought of with that word? Are these just astronomers, astrologers who seem to have maybe quote unquote secret wisdom because they understand the stars? Maybe that's what the thought is there. But I think that we would do well to kind of think about the Magi less as like scholars, and I'm sure they were that, and a little bit more like druids or shamans or Gandalf, right? So less Neil deGrasse Tyson, more Gandalf. That would be somewhere on that spectrum. Okay, somewhere on that. And I think we tend to lean towards Neil deGrasse Tyson, some sort of scholar who looks at the stars, and less like Gandalf. I think we should swing the pendulum just a little bit back and realize that the first people who came to worship the Messiah were wizards or shamans or sages, or however you want to say that. They were foreigners who looked at the stars and knew to come and worship the king. I don't think that that's insignificant. And I do think that we lose something in our modern reductionist worldview when we reject the stars as just being what we can describe through naturalistic means, just being burning balls of plasma. They're more than that. And Scripture even says it. Psalm 19 says that they are communicating something to us. How specific is that? I don't know. Do your own work with Romans chapter 10. And let me know what you think. But we cannot lose the concept of the heavenly realm, because if we take a note from the wise men, from the Magi, and realize that they got it, they understood what was happening in their time more than what the religious leaders of their time would have understood. They didn't get it. The religious leaders didn't get it. Okay, and again, I'm not trying to be too harsh to our modern evangelical church, but the religious leaders of our time, I think, might be missing something. And we might do well to listen to someone like Michael Heiser, who I think is a very brave theologian, to just follow the text where it leads. So that's for you. I hope that this is valuable to you. If you're here at this point, thank you. And if you have already subscribed, thank you. If you know somebody, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you know somebody who would benefit from videos like this, please share this with your friends. I really do love building a community around these types of discussions. I think we need to have more of them. And the feedback that I get from you guys is really great. I really want to build a good community here, to have good dialogue. So we welcome people who disagree. We welcome other ideas. Let's just do that in a way that facilitates dialogue and facilitates a community of people willing to learn. And I love it. I love that that's happening with this channel. So share it with your friends that might benefit. Subscribe. What else? Comment. Hey, those are all good. If you haven't hit the like button, those all help to tell that YouTube AI that people are interested in having these conversations, and it will send it out to, and it will find. That's the cool thing about kind of using YouTube, is YouTube will find those people for us and bring them into this community, and that we would benefit from their ideas and their feedback and their part of the discussion and the dialogue. I think that's really cool. So, doing all that stuff helps. So with that long and drawn out conclusion, I'll catch you in the next one.